Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is a lecture for European history for Thursday, 29th of April, 2021. And before we get into Nazi stuff, if you watched both videos yesterday that I put up, which, you were here for class, but I put up a second video besides what I recorded for you at the beginning of period 2. And what it included was me ranting about YouTube. Some of the stuff that you heard as you were leaving because YouTube had banned the Horst Wessel song. Now, I did tell you to glance online, and I found finally a version of it. You had to, of course, go about 15 minutes into a video and watch, and then, so you had to timestamp begin and end it. And there was a separate place that had the lyrics. And, of course, none of the Nazi imagery that I had wanted you to see, because I had wanted you to see the Nazi propaganda in its authentic form, because I'm teaching you about the Nazis. And teaching you Nazis bad, don't learn about them, is not the way I choose to do this. Because I don't think you inoculate yourself against evil by not thinking about evil. I think you inoculate yourself against evil by learning about it so that you can spot it in its various forms, and so that you can come up with a question that's rather important to each of you, which is, do you think it's evil? Just because the world says it's evil, do you agree? Do you disagree? And here's even more important, why or why not? I was angry. You might have noticed that at the end of last class. And one of the things about teaching is that, golly gee whiz, it's about decision making, like any other consequential job. Thousands of little decisions are made every day. And yesterday, at the beginning of period 2, I had a choice to make. I could not share with them my degree of anger with YouTube, or I could use that anger and channel it into a teaching moment. And I chose to use it and channel it into a teaching moment. But while I still think that was a good idea, because I was so bleeping upset, the scary Mr. Ginorio was fully on display. Now, I say the scary Mr. Ginorio with some degree of tongue-in-cheek, because I don't think I'm very scary. However, this evening, or yesterday evening, when I talked about it with my wife, she pointed out that she thought I was scary throughout our entire engagement and into our first year or two of marriage, at least when I was angry. Now, she loved me, and she was willing to put up with me, but apparently I get like a pufferfish when I get angry. I get all big, and I'm loud, and I gesticulate, and I do all this stuff. And in my mind, I'm being passionate, and I'm trying to engage you on an emotional as well as an intellectual level. And also, I think it's good for you to see people in a variety of states. I was showing you somebody who was trying to be productively angry. But she pointed out that normal people other than me, and her, because she chooses to put up with me, and people who don't know me as well as she does, might actually have a gut-level reaction to scary Mr. Ginorio. And that gut reaction might be something that actually bothers people. In other words, when most people rant and rave, it's a sign that they're on the edge of their emotional control and they could do anything, including start swinging fists or furniture or whatever. When I rant and rave, it's part of my job. I am comfortable ranting and raving, like an actor is comfortable feigning emotions on stage. This is one of the things I do. And sometimes I rant and rave with utter joy in my heart. Other times I do it with a bit of anger. Yesterday I did it with more anger than I usually allow myself to have, because you never know when you're angry. It's like if you get to a point where you have to discipline a small child, don't ever do it if you can help it while you're upset. Always be calm. Always be calm in your heart, because If you're dealing with little kids when you're upset, all they're going to get is angry, scary adult. And you might do things that you later regret. So that's just good advice. But she pointed out that, again, normal people might be shocked or disturbed by the fulsomeness of my rage, affect, whatever. And so I'm here to remind you of a couple of things. Number one, I take some of my theater from General George S. Patton, who was once told by his chaplain, or no, actually his chief aide, you know, I can tell when you're acting angry, and you can tell when you're acting angry. But sometimes they don't, they, being the rest of the army, doesn't understand when you're acting angry. And his answer was, good. I don't want them to understand that. I want them to be more afraid of me than the Germans. I don't want you to be afraid of me. I do want you to learn from me useful things. And some of the useful things aren't the history. When I was first a teacher, I was student teaching for a group of ninth graders at Maine, and I taught them a full quarter of geography. And unlike every other student teacher I've ever heard of, they basically threw me in on day one, and I taught all the way to the end of the first quarter. And I did that because my host teacher was going through some stuff, and basically he needed to step back. And I was perfectly confident that I could handle the classroom, which I was, but I still had a lot to learn. In any case, I loved these kids. I really did. These were the first group of students I ever had, and I thought the world of them. And by the 4 years later, half of them quit college in the first semester, and another 10 or 20% fail out of college within the first 2 years. And of most of them that quit and failed, it's not like they went into the army or went into the merchant marine or went out into the world and got an interesting job or got a job in construction that pays well. Or most of them stayed at home and rotted. Many of them became drug addicts. I don't want that for any of my kids. And I think that being resilient is one of those things that's helpful. So I figure if you can handle the rough history stuff that I have to teach, and if you can handle me in all of my forms, and if you can also learn to handle an environment where maybe I don't reflect your personal viewpoint, I don't coddle it, I don't try to apologize for having a point of view. But what I do is try to encourage you to bring your point of view forward, especially when it disagrees with mine, because that's more interesting. I think it's better for you in the long run than being sheltered. The last point on this is when my wife first went to college, she was in an all-girls dorm on a quiet floor. And this was at a time when they had all-girls dorms on a quiet floor. She was at the University of Southern Maine. But even though it was an all-girls dorm on a quiet floor, one of her neighbors just down the hall had come from a family that completely sheltered her. They were very Christian, not that there's anything wrong with that. And this girl had lived a life absolutely on the straight and narrow. She had never experienced being around people who drank alcohol, which my wife and others did, because it was college. And at that time, 18 was the drinking age, and who smoked cigarettes, and who occasionally had boys in their room. It wasn't that this girl, who had been sheltered, was with a roommate who did these things. It's that there were people doing these things that she deeply didn't understand and didn't approve of in rooms near where she lived. And she ended up imploding and going home within the first semester. I want you to be more resilient. So if I seem scary, it's usually theatrical. I would never, ever use that scariness in a way that was designed to hurt any of my students. I think you know that, but I feel the need to say it. And the only time that I ever act on it is if somebody is in danger. Back in my old high school, on 2 separate occasions, men came into the room and started attacking students, started attacking other students. This was because of family stuff. And I, in both cases, had to put them into the wall. But that was to protect. So, anyway, just thought I'd say that because I got so. And if, by the way, if you haven't seen my angry video, it's video 2, and you should, because then it'll explain all this. Okay, any thoughts or questions? Oh, the other thing I'm going to do is, with the provision that you sit 1 seat apart, if you don't like where you're sitting, move. Now, if you want. If you like where you're sitting, stay. But I feel that we're at a point now where we no longer need to have rigid, pre-planned seating. So if any of you have been really yearning to sit elsewhere than where you're now sitting, feel free to move.
Not be at the table.
Yes. Cannot be at my desk. It cannot be in the middle of the floor, camping out.
Not in the middle of them.
No, it has to be in a chair around a table designed for students. If you change your mind tomorrow and you want to come in, feel free to do so. In some classes, I'm actually going to scramble people around, but not in this one. Okay, so where were we? Nazis!
Woo!
Yeah, okay.
My favorite.
So, Hitler is in prison, Landsberg prison, because he has tried to overthrow the government and failed. When you overthrow the government and succeed, you're called the leader. When you try to overthrow the government and fail, you either get shot or you end up in prison, or you end up in exile somewhere. But he used his trial to become a celebrity, to speak on radio, and the judge let him monologue. So a lot of people who had never heard of Hitler suddenly became very impressed with him. And in prison, his roommate is his personal secretary, a man named Rudolf Hess, who later becomes the deputy Führer, and who later, well, I'll tell you that story later. And Hitler dictates a book called Mein Kampf, which means My Struggle. And in Mein Kampf, which is incredibly dense, I read parts of it when I was your age. It's not a bad thing to try to do to get a sense of what Hitler thought, because he was kind of important to history. But never let it be said that Hitler hid his agenda from the world. Most everything he did, he either directly said, I will do this, or he strongly hinted, I will probably do something like this in Mein Kampf. He wasn't saying to the world, I will be peaceful and warm and open and fuzzy. No, he was very clear. And here are some of the things that he talked about, and later when he got power, implemented. First off, there is a hierarchy of race. Different people, like different animals, can be classified by race. Race determines all sorts of things. A person's physical capacities, a person's intellectual capacities, a person's moral capacities. The master race, the Herrenvolk, the Übermensch, Herrenvolk are the high people, Übermensch is Superman. That's a Nietzschean concept that Hitler appropriates and twists. But the Übermensch, the Superman, is the Aryan. Now, the Aryan, as Hitler sees it, the Aryan ideal, doesn't look a lot like Hitler or a lot of his cronies. Tall, muscular, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, cream-colored skin, square jaw. Yeah, you'd be a good feminine.
Wait, didn't he like twins as well?
That was Mengele. That was one of his doctors.
Blonde-haired, blue-eyed twin.
Yeah, there you go. Oh no, look, and he later will actually set up a program to purpose breed his kind of person. I'll tell you about that later. But under the master race, the Übermensch, the Superman, are the Servitor races. By the way, the English are part of the master race, not the Scots, not the Welsh, not the Irish. because they're Celts. But the English are Anglo-Saxons. So Anglo-Saxons, being Germanic peoples, are also part of the Aryan nation. And I'm going to close the windows because it seems colder.
I am. I was just saying, it's like I matched with everything on that because I'm English.
So beware, because there are people in this world who are not fair, who might hold that against you, oddly enough. Seriously.
It's done black.
Well, no, but I have had friends who were as white Anglo-Saxon Protestants as you may be, and whenever they got into arguments with people, often those people, if they were strangers, would say, "You Nazi," just assuming that because you're born a certain way, you're a Nazi. No doubt, these people would also think that they're anti-racists, who attack people who are. In any event, Hitler doesn't make any bones about it. Under the Übermensch, the Herrenvolk, the master race, are the Servitor races. These include the Celts, the Irish-type peoples, the sort of cream-skinned, freckle-faced, red-haired, ginger types, and the French. The French are sort of an amalgam of Celtic and Roman. The Spanish are sort of an amalgam of Celtic, Roman, and Arab. And the Italians, too, an amalgam of Celtic, Roman, and Arab. The Greeks are on the edge. The Hungarians are on the edge. But they're all acceptable servitor races. These are races that you can trust to do medium-level jobs, to be your assistant, manager, to help you in your home. You could have people of these races help raise your kids as sort of servants or whatever. Then you've got the slave races. And chief among them are the Slavs of Eastern Europe. In fact, there is a loose connection between the word Slav and slave. These include the Poles, the Lithuanians, Latvians, Estonians, the Russians, the White Russians, the Ukrainians. It includes the Romanians, the Serbs. And these Slavs of Eastern Europe, oddly enough, are fairly close to the Aryan ideal in a moment. Because Slavs are creamy-skinned, blue-eyed, blonde-haired, square-jawed, and, as well-built as any other type of person. But Germans make a real distinction between the Germanic peoples that originate in Scandinavia and the Slavic people who are from der Ost, the East. So Poles, for example, who are right up against the Germans, they're good for field work, they're good for grunt labor like digging ditches or building canals, but you can't really trust them to be thoughtful or to handle any kind of responsibility. They're just not suited to it, according to Hitler.
So it came to my attention that I'm pretty sure at least 4 major empires have tried to enslave the Slavic people. Because when the Romans came up through Europe, it was the Kiev and Rus, I think. And they were proto-Slavs, kind of.
Yeah. Kiev and Rus came a little later, but the Romans did deal with the Sarmatians, the Carpi, and a bunch of other proto-Slavic peoples. Please go on.
And then a couple other people.
Scythians.
Yeah. Both and other people tried to enslave them. So there's kind of a mid-border along the Caspian, the Black Sea, counting Romania, and kind of all the places around there, Wakanda. That's a made-up place. That's
It's okay. It's okay. Yeah, Wallachia. Wallachia exists. It's part of Romania. It's along with Moldavia.
Yeah.
Wakanda's where vibranium comes from. It's cool. They're the most advanced country in the world. Never mind. I find funny things about Wakanda that I shouldn't say. If they were so advanced, why would they let never mind. Yeah. Anyone be enslaved? Go.
Anyways, yeah, so it seems like a lot of people have tried to do it, and I don't think really any of them did successfully.
Because it's such a huge area.
Yeah, I feel like the Nazis should have learned from that and been the Slavic people are kind of just not worthy of that. Not worthy. That sounds really bad.
No, I get it. No, but they're not conquerable. They're invictus, as the Romans would call it, which is unconquerable. Look, yeah, Napoleon tried conquering Russia, didn't end well for him. But the thing about Hitler, which I'm going to explain later, and Napoleon and men like them, is they have their own hubris is the cause of their success and their ultimate nemesis, because they don't know when to stop. They don't calculate the risk. They don't decide, this is a doable thing, so I'm going to go for it. They go for what they want. And because they're bold and pretty competent, they get more than anyone from their background should have ever gotten. Hitler would never have become the leader of Germany, Napoleon the leader of France, and Stalin the leader of Russia if they hadn't been willing to say, to heck with the odds, I'm going to do what I want to do. But there's the nemesis, because at no point can they say, I've got enough. Like Oliver at the beginning of the musical, they want more. They always want more. And so they end up having an insatiable ambition. And the insatiability of that ambition, the very insatiability of it, is going to cause their doom. Because eventually they will go too far, like invading Russia. In the Cold War, we never intended to invade Russia. We were just going to flatten it with atomic weapons, which is a different thing. But it kept them in line. It did. And they threatened to flatten us with atomic weapons, and it kept us in line, too. It was a mutual thing.
No.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is going back to the Superman thing, and I don't know when else I could slide this in here, but there's an alternate Superman storyline called Superman Red Sun, where it's like a what if he gets dropped into Soviet Russia.
Yeah.
I haven't read it, but I really want to.
On YouTube, they've animated it. I saw it a year or two ago.
Is it good?
It's creepy. Yeah, I thought it was good. If you like comics and if you like anime, yeah. Do you remember what it was called? Just Superman Red Sun or something?
Yeah, Superman Red Sun.
But if you look up Red Superman on a search engine on YouTube, you should find it. And basically, it's truth, justice, and the Soviet way. In fact, they have an alternate slogan, truth, justice, and the American way. And it's interesting. It really is, because Stalin still exists, and he's trying to control Superman. And that's an interesting dynamic. Thank you for bringing it up. Yeah, no, that's that. I enjoyed that. I also found it really disturbing.
So, I'd be kind of screwed. Right?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Definitely. No. The dark olive-skinned people were servants. But, and I'm olive-skinned too.
Yeah.
But what we have beyond the Slavs are the other slave races, which of course include the blacks and most Asians, and the American Indians. So let me go through this, because I want to actually get somewhere, and I'll come back to you. I'm not going to circle back, though, because I don't do that. I'm too right-wing. It's a press secretary joke. Okay. But under the slave races are the Untermenschen, the subhumans. And the subhumans are the enemies of humanity. They want to destroy, they're like the devil in Christianity or Judaism or Islam, or they're like Angra Mainyu, the Dark Lord in Zoroastrianism. And these Untermenschen are the Jews. The Jews are not fully human. They are anti-human. They are subhuman. They are, according to Hitler, a parasitical race that doesn't have a nation of its own, but instead, like a virus, infiltrates other lands and other peoples, and becomes the bankers in those lands, and the power brokers in those lands, and the business magnates in those lands. And through their money and power and nefarious conspiracy, they rule the world. Hitler said that America was ruled by the Jews, that Britain was ruled by the Jews, even though the Jews were a small minority, because of their money, their influence, and their utter subhuman, anti-human dedication to controlling the human race. Hitler and others reference a bogus document created, I think, by the Russian secret police under the Tsar, called the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. And the Protocols of the Elders of Zion is touted as evidence of an international Jewish conspiracy that has ruled the world for many centuries, and that will continue to rule the world unless people, especially the master race, wakes up. So for Hitler, everything is race. However, he does make certain exceptions. For example, Since the Arabs are natural enemies of the Jews, Hitler calculates, he invites the leader of the Palestinian Arabs, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, Haj Amin al-Husseini, to Germany many times. And Haj Amin al-Husseini and the Arabs are made honorary Aryans. And he shares with Haj Amin al-Husseini his plan to destroy Judaism by their physical extermination, which is not something he tells the rest of the world yet. He tells Husseini. The Japanese, because they are willing to also be a predator nation among prey nations, and are part of the alliance that ultimately forms between Germany, Italy, and Japan, called the Tripartite Pact, or the Axis. They're honorary Aryans. They are the Aryan equivalents in Asia, because a tiny nation, conquers large areas of China, because they're aggressive, because they're warlike. The notion of the predator among prey is what allows Hitler to respect Benny the Moose, Mussolini, even though the Italians are clearly racially inferior to the Germans. I mean, they are. Just ask Hitler. He'll tell you. But remember Rome. How does Hitler account for the Roman Empire? Well, what Hitler ultimately says is that the great Romans, the manly Romans, went north and bred with German women and produced, a hybrid race of and ultimately were absorbed by the Aryans. But that the real get up and go that Rome had got up and went and left Italy, and so the Italians were left behind. But Mussolini is one of the only modern Italian Romans. So he respects Mussolini personally, and there are reasons for this. But race is everything. Yes?
So, I can't remember which ancient philosopher it was. It was an ancient Greek philosopher.
Mm-hmm.
He had this giant book of stuff that he published, and it was a whole ton of basically recordings of what he saw in his visions. It's all sorts of supernatural and mystic and stuff. But he predicted 3 comings of the
Okay, let me clarify. You are right, except he's not Greek. He's French.
French. Okay.
His name was Nostradamus.
Yes.
He was in the 1400s. He worked with a woman named Catherine Medici, who was Queen of France, and he had these poetical things. And yes, you were saying 3 Antichrists.
He said that the first one in his writings was a short man who commonly rode on horseback.
Yep, that's Napoleon.
That's Napoleon, and then he said he would conquer half of Europe before being banished and coming back.
And he was banished and came back.
And then
although he conquered all of Europe.
The second one, he gave a name. Hitler. And he said he would kill a whole ton of people, start a giant war, and do all this stuff. And there was a whole ton of red and stuff.
Yeah.
And then the third one, he said that it would start a 30-year war that was pretty international, and the fall of the largest government would happen in that war. And I think he said Magus, I think, is the name.
Well, there's Gog and Magog that were referred to this. This is a reference also to apocalypse literature in the Bible and elsewhere. Go on.
And so that is yet to happen. There hasn't been a 30-year war.
Yet. Oh, there was one in Germany, but that's different. Yeah. No, the third Antichrist, or the third Messiah, or the third great conqueror, is often referred to in Nostradamus' couplets, quatrains they're called, as having a turban. And there are a lot of people who equate him with leading an Islamic war against European civilization. And the people who equate that see the Islamic Messiah, the Mahdi, as being this third Antichrist, because it's a war against European civilization. Ultimately, though, all 3 conquerors are defeated. Nostradamus ultimately agrees with the end of the book of Revelation. He talks about 1,000 years of peace and so on and so forth. I'm not a personal believer in Nostradamus, but even I have to admit that some of his stuff, looking back, seems remarkably prescient. So,
one letter off.
Yeah, you never know.
We invented a time machine, and then he simply went back and just...
And watched. There you go. The question is, was the time machine blue, and did he have companions with him, and Doctor Who read? Okay, so the doctrine is a synthesis of nationalism and socialism. In other words, we are one people, we are unified in a common destiny. That means all of us need to be taken care of. So what Hitler proposes is that the Nazi Party act as the intercessor between the brain and the hands. We've talked about this. They will moderate the differences of opinion between the owners of industry and the workers in industry, between the urban and the rural. The intervening heart between the head and the hands is the Nazi Party, the warm and fuzzy Nazi Party. And to an extent, they do this. The workers of Germany are given a Labor Day holiday, the May Day holiday. Their ability to run independent unions is outlawed. Every association needs to be a Nazi association. So there are Nazi associations of workers that work with Nazi associations of business owners that come together. In this sense, it's a bit like Mussolini's corporative state. But what Hitler really stands for is what is called Third Gemeinschaft. And this is a typical German compound word. It's word salad. Volksgemeinschaft means the brotherhood of all Germans. And in a vision of what this actually is, Volksgemeinschaft is, imagine that in every community once a week, everyone sits down to a common meal. And that common meal is something simple like barley soup and bread. And there's beer, lots of B words. And the owner of the factory sits next to the janitor in the factory, sits next to a housewife, sits next to a college professor, and so everyone is mixed. You've got people who never would have associated before the Nazis, eating, drinking, breaking bread together, talking, laughing, joking, getting to know one another. The idea is Nazis are going to bring out a community spirit that's going to make Germany stronger than ever before by bringing all different types of people into a common society, the brotherhood of all Germans, Volksgemeinschaft. Of course, anti-Semitism is something that should unify Germans as well. The recognition that we've got an alien nation within our midst that we need to expel, like cancer that we need to cut out. That is the imagery that Hitler uses with the Jews. And, of course, also, Germany needs to rearm. It has to shake off the shackles of Versailles, have a real army again with tanks, a Luftwaffe, an air force with military aircraft, a navy with submarines and battleships, and we need to be strong. We need to be Germany again. And Germany is not Germany without military strength. So these are at the core of Hitler's ideas. And you'll see later how they become government policy. Now, as hyperinflation and the Great Depression begin to shake the German society and economy apart, as more and more people are out of work or are underemployed, are desperate, as more and more people actually come close to starving and literally do starve to death in the middle of some of the most developed cities in one of the most developed nations on earth, starving to death, dying, sometimes in the streets. The people become more and more unhappy with the Weimar government. And because of this social, economic, and political unrest, the governments begin to change. The president, Paul von Hindenburg, remains the same. But in Germany, the president fulfills a lot of the roles that the Queen of England fulfills. It's sort of a ceremonial office. He represents not a party, bless you, but he represents the nation. So the president is supposed to be above politics. Well, President Hindenburg, again and again, has to call for new elections because the current Reichstag, the current German parliament, doesn't seem to be capable of dealing with these problems. One of the problems is the fear of communism. Everyone is afraid, and for good reason, that when people are so poor, they are going to be, tempted to accept communism. Because communists, whatever else they do, except Stalin and Mao Zedong, what they seem to do, what they pretend and promise to do, is keep everyone fed. Communism is supposed to assure everyone of a universal basic income. No one is supposed to starve. No one is supposed to be homeless. In a communist society, you may have all sorts of negatives, but everyone should be basically taken care of. That is the promise. Unfortunately, or fortunately, it goes unfulfilled in many cases. But we won't talk about that. Starving people are told by communists, whatever else will happen, you will be fed. And when you're hungry and your loved ones are starving, that's a powerful inducement. What shall we do to prevent communism? This is what all the other parties of Germany, including many socialists, had to ask themselves. What are we going to do to prevent a communist revolution during this global Great Depression? And Hitler's party, which was National Socialist, has also been gaining ground. Hitler's party, thugs, the Sturmabteilung, the SA men, the brown shirts, are the only people who consistently fight the red-shirted communist thugs in the streets. For year after year, there are street battles all over Germany between Nazi gangs and communist gangs. So more and more people look at the Nazi Party as a possible alternative. We talked about inoculation a lot this year in our society because of the coronavirus. Well, what if communism is a virus? How can Germany inoculate itself against communist socialism at a time when people are looking at socialism very favorably because of the starvation, because of the economic collapse? What if, a number of German leaders say in late 1932, what if we take a certain kind of socialism into our body politic? What if we accept National Socialism? And by accepting National Socialism, we will be able to better defend ourselves against Communist Socialism by taking a little bit of the socialist virus. It will become ours, and we won't have to worry about the outside virus of international communism coming in and taking over. Now, this idea of inoculating yourself with a foreign idea is not unique to Germany. It's something that actually China and Japan both have to deal with when they contend with the modern world, and we'll talk more about that. But in the case of the Nazi leadership, as Hitler wins, his party wins more power in the Reichstag, as Hitler runs for president and fails, he still demonstrates he has a lot of support, and his support isn't just among the elites. Unlike many of the conservative parties and centrist parties in Germany, Hitler's support goes top down. There are some elites, there are some workers, and there are middle-class people in between. So, after a series of governments that just can't even begin to grapple, Hindenburg offers Hitler a chance to form a new government. He will be the Reichschancellor, the prime minister, and he and several other Nazis will participate in this cabinet. And the idea that the elites have is this little corporal, he's a corporal. This little guy with the Charlie Chaplin mustache and the prison haircut. This little guy who makes all these ridiculous speeches, appealing as a demagogue. He really, really doesn't understand what it's going to take to run a country. And he will be impressed by our wealth, our sophistication, and our long pedigree of power. When we bring him into power, he'll need us. When we bring him into power, we'll make him ours. We will dominate and control Adolf Hitler. know who they were messing with. This is Adolf Hitler. But they underestimate him. They think he's a little man, a petty man, and easily impressed and overawed. And oh my God! So they make him chancellor at the end of January 1933, thinking they'll control him. Well, golly whiz! Within a month and a half of Hitler becoming Reichschancellor, the German Parliament building burns down. It's arson. Now, who did it? Well, a socialist, communist is blamed for it. But there are many historians who wonder if Hitler did it. Because the Reichstag Fire was seen by the press and by all segments of the German people, not just an attack upon a particular political party, like an attack on Hitler and the Nazis. It was seen as an attack upon all of Germany, an institution of all of Germany. This is a bit like the January 6th riot was portrayed in the American media, that this wasn't just a protest, it was an insurrection, and it was an attack on an American institution, not merely an attack by one political party against another. But the Reichstag Fire, unlike the January 6th thing so far, was used by a chancellor and a government eager to redefine everything. So, Hitler declares a state of national emergency. Hindenburg agrees. The Reichstag agrees. They vote Hitler emergency powers. Now, if this sounds familiar, it's because you've probably seen Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Because George Lucas takes what happened after the Reichstag fire and applies it to the Emperor Palpatine. And so Palpatine, the Chancellor of the Galactic Republic, is given emergency powers, and it's an important step on his way to becoming the Emperor. That's what happens with Hitler, except he doesn't become the Emperor. He simply, with emergency powers, is able to rule without parliament, is able to rule without compromise, is able to rule Germany in whatever way he wants. And the emergency never ends. The state of emergency provoked by the Reichstag fire is the basis of all Nazi law thereafter. It is a turning point in history, a deflection point. And this is in 1933. Over the next year and a half or so, Hitler works with an increasingly old and out-of-touch Hindenburg, who stays more and more out of Hitler's way. Now, Hindenburg has contempt for the little corporal, and he shows it. And he can get away with it because he's the president and Hitler is not. While Hindenburg is alive, there's a check on Hitler's power. But I think at the end of 34 or at the beginning of 35, Hindenburg dies. And when President Hindenburg dies, the office of president is abolished. The office of chancellor is converted into an office that gives Hitler individual power over everything in Germany. And we will talk about the details of that power next time. Any questions, comments, or thoughts? Okay, thank you for your attention. And again, you can change your seats if you want to. Bye.